So again, I do want to thank Sylvia and the team at Buying Legal for all of the work that they've done to help facilitate this. I'm really excited for today's discussion with my friends from Prudential Financial. I think we've spent a good amount of time laying groundwork this month with our previous discussions around what privileged data is and why you might want to consider additional protections around it, some of the benchmark capabilities to understand where your outside counsel might sit, where other programs might sit. But the important part for me is along the bottom here. It's that blue thread that weaves us from the why to the what to today's discussion, which is much more focused on the how. And I think that's the part that I get really excited about, because what Prudential has done is taken all of these ideas and these concepts and these notions and put them into practice to actively manage risk. And that's what today's discussion is going to focus on. Next week, as Sylvia mentioned, we'll be talking about another risk management strategy around contracts. We'll be joined by some of our colleagues here from the Legal Management Consulting business unit at Duff & Phelps, who I think will also have a lot of tangible ways to address these risks. But today I'm going to go ahead and stop the slides and let the video come back up, because the people on this call I think are going to be the real stars of today's show. I'm going to do some light introductions here before the discussion. I'm going to start with you, Anthony. Anthony Evans is a manager at Prudential's third-party risk management team, where his responsibility scope covers the law, compliance, and business ethics, or LCBE, and external affairs departments. In this role, he manages the third-party lifecycle end-to-end in alignment with company standards and best practices across a multitude of vendors, some of which include law firms. I also learned that he is quite a woodworker and has built that homage to New Jersey that you see behind him. So good morning, Anthony. Glad you're here.
Thanks, Shay.
We are also joined by Jomara Negron, who is the Vendor Governance Officer and Business Information Security Officer for the Law, Compliance, and Business Ethics Department. In this role, she has oversight of third-party risk management and information security functions. And Jomara is a seasoned financial services professional with over a decade of experience addressing these control functions in a compliance, a third-party risk management, and an information security setting. So good morning, Jomara. Nice to have you.
Good morning.
And finally, we're joined by Mike Delle, who's the Vice President in Prudential's Law, Compliance, Business Ethics, and External Affairs organization, where he oversees the overall responsibility for third-party risk management, information security, and outside counsel management, which is a pretty broad purview. He also provides executive support to leaders in the Law and External Affairs organization. So he is a very busy man, and I am glad to be joined by him this morning. Good morning, Mike.
Thanks, Shay. Morning, everybody.
So before I start asking questions of the panelists, I do want to ask a quick question of the audience. So Sylvia, if you'll go ahead and put today's poll up. What I'm curious about is the status of your organization's legal vendor cyber risk management program. And the goal here is to help us tailor the discussion to the audience, to the phase that you're in, whether you're planning, just in discussions, whether you are starting, you've initiated some work with your legal vendors, whether you're growing, adding scope, adding depth, adding number of entities you're assessing, maybe you're maturing, you have built out a program and now you're adding processes or technology on top, or you're optimizing, where you are really just fine-tuning, looking for velocity, looking for efficiencies. Unfortunately, hosts and panelists cannot vote. I think I know what Prudential would select. But we'll give you about 10 more seconds here to finish your selections, and then that will help us really tailor our discussion. And I'm sure the results are being tabulated. All right. So the vast majority is maturing, which is really fantastic, frankly, because I think we're going to be able to cover the nuances of these programs in depth. But we do have some representation from planning and starting. The second most popular category there is growing, which I think is also a reasonable place to be, as this is a big challenge. So, Mike, I want to put the opening question to you. Not so much about the third-party cyber risk program first, but more about LCBE and Prudential's approach to managing your relationship with outside counsel, the purview and the scope of this program. Can you help set the scene for us here?
Yeah, sure. Before we get started, I'd just like to thank both Sylvia and Shay for inviting us to be part of this discussion. It's something that we, namely Jomara and Anthony, have spent a lot of time developing over the last couple of years, Shay, with your help, of course. And we're really excited to talk to the group today. So wanted to make sure we made that point. When it comes to the relationship that we have with our law firms, Prudential is a pretty big company, one with a very horizontal business unit portfolio, and so we really rely on our firms to help us kind of navigate the changing waters, whether it be the regulatory landscape or other areas where we need external assistance. But when it comes to the relationship, I mean, it's something that we've spent years developing, many more years than any of us here on the screen have been a part of the company. And we put a lot of energy into it, not just our team, but all the way to the general counsel himself. And one of the things that I think is worth mentioning is that we have what we call a relationship manager for each of our law firms. That's typically an internal counsel that kind of has the closest day-to-day contact with a law firm, and we use that voice to help us communicate directly with the firm when we're rolling out any kind of new process, let alone just cybersecurity and information security. Another focus that we have with our law firms, we really have a strong commitment to encouraging them to develop diverse talent. That's really important to us at Prudential. Really expect that they're kind of bringing along young talent in different ways, and we commit to helping in that journey. So, I mean, I could go on and on about this for a while. That's not why we're here. But I guess what I would say is, long story short, this is a relationship that we put a lot of effort into. It's one that we rely on. And frankly, I would say in a lot of respects, we look at some of our law firms as an extension of our in-house teams, and really trust them and bring them into the mix on some of our most challenging issues.
Yep. I think that's a great way to set it up, because I think the challenge that you mentioned is that these relationships transcend the players, and they in many ways transcend up to the organization level as true partners. So let me ask a question of you, Jomara, as the vendor governance officer and as the business information security officer. Given these strong relationships and really, frankly, partnerships with your outside counsel, how do you approach initially this problem of legal vendor cyber risk, which is complicated and can be difficult to address even internally, much less with partners? Tell us a little bit about that initial effort for you.
Sure. Yeah, it's been a little while now. So looking back at when we first started building the program, I think one of the first things that we began working on, which was, I think, a foundational element, was the development of a risk rating tool that allowed us to tier firms by risk, right? So developing that at the onset was the most important part for us. That allowed us to focus on the firms that we thought to be of higher risk, right? So we had a view into, the risk of each law firm. And then that also allowed us to tier, it gave us a view into the volume that we would be essentially handling based on the risk rating methodology that we developed. So I think that was very critical from a foundational perspective. And there, what we did was we made sure that we partnered very closely with key stakeholders, right? So we wanted to make sure that we worked very closely with the global enterprise privacy office and the information security office, as well as the operational risk management, just to make sure that we were caring for all of the relevant risks that they were going to be making sure that we cared for, right? For example, personal information, the handling of that information. So those were kind of like the two foundational elements. And then from there, based on the risk tiers, of that risk rating tool, we selected the firms that were going to be subjected to due diligence. And then we communicated very clearly to the law firms what was coming their way, what was going to be expected from them. And then we moved into, communicating submitting the request to them, sending the questionnaires, and then from there we moved into the assessment of the information.
Without giving away the secret sauce, can you tell us a little bit more about the type of things you evaluated for this inherent risk rating to help tier these? Because I think that framing of the problem set is really important, and I'm curious how you guys approach that.
Yep, sure. So it was really just based at the onset around the spend. So spend was one data point that we gathered as part of the risk rating tool. And then we coupled that with the number of matters that a firm was handling. So that gave us a sense of potentially the impact that we would potentially be subjected to if there were a breach. And then the volume of data that the firm would be handling for us. So those were the two data points that we used for the risk rating tool.
Okay, good. So Jomara is busy here managing the risk side, the security side. When you take a step back, Mike, and then Anthony, I'm going to come to you in a minute for the day in the life on the ground piece. But when you take a step back from this initial approach, what worked, what didn't, what kind of lessons learned are there for those who might be in that growing phase or that starting phase? Because getting from 0 to 1, this is an important part and not always easy or straightforward. So when you reflect, how does it look to you, Mike?
Yeah, it's a good question, and I'll probably connect it back to something that I mentioned at the outset, which was really the value that we put in these relationships. We knew in order for anything to get off the ground effectively, and I'll kind of stay away from the details, but we needed to have the buy-in from the top, right? So, you're going to hear a lot today from Jomara and Anthony about, the specifics of the program. Where I'm able to help, or where I try and help, is to make sure that we've got support from leadership, right? We knew we could not roll out a program like this, without their buy-in, and really we didn't have to convince them as much as make sure that they were aware and comfortable with the concepts and the protocols, right? And so I think we spent a lot of time making sure that there was not going to be a situation where folks were caught off guard, namely, executive level folks caught off guard by this.
Yep.
And so, I think when I look back at what worked well, that's one thing that I would recommend folks do here. It might be implied, but I think oftentimes we lose sight of who's aware of our day-to-day activities, right? I mean, people are obviously focused on things different than we are when it comes to their day-to-day responsibilities, and so getting that alignment up front from leadership was something that I think we got right. The second side of your question, what maybe didn't work so well, and Jomara alluded to this a little bit a minute ago. We knew we needed a quick and efficient way to get our hands around how we should prioritize these evaluations, right? And so we relied on two data points, those, the annual spend and the number of matters handled. They were certainly not precise measures, right? But to Jomara's point, they were directional in terms of helping us understand where we should start. And then, the other lesson learned, I think, I would put out there, speaks more to kind of the manual process that we had at the outset. We certainly involved all the key stakeholders that Jomara mentioned, but at the beginning, we were not leveraging technology to help, right? And so we had, calls with firms and, probably anywhere from half a dozen to a dozen Prudential SMEs on these calls, evaluating forms that firms filled out. And so we realized really early on that was not going to be how we moved forward with speed. We knew it wasn't going to be sustainable. And so what I would say is we were committed to being flexible. We knew early that we got that part wrong, but we're committed to switching gears and moving forward in a way that we knew we could keep up with and demonstrate value.
Yeah, I think that is really one of the things that you have done so well is recognizing that it's a process. It's not a project. It's not a one-time thing. and that the goal is to get better. And so, Jomara, let me ask you, when you reflect on some of those flexibility, I think was a term that Mike used, those inflection points of, well, we were doing it this way, maybe we'll try a different way. What are a couple of those things that had the downstream effect, that flexibility in action? How did that come out and manifest in different decisions and different operations from your perspective?
Sure, yeah. So like Mike said, at one point in time, I think we had about 15 SMEs or subject matter experts and stakeholders on one call to assess one firm. And while we knew at the onset that it was very important to maintain those relationships with those key stakeholders from an enterprise perspective, from a process and efficiency perspective, it was just not realistic. So what we did, we insourced a lot of the expertise within our team, right? So we said, all right, we can learn how to assess a firm from a records management perspective and from a business continuity perspective and from an information security perspective. So we insourced a lot of that expertise in our team so that we didn't have to have 10 different subject matter experts on a call, right? So one team member could handle one assessment for a law firm. So that made the process way more efficient. The other thing, like Mike said, the Word, it was a Word document we were asking law firms to complete. I think it was like maybe, 40 pages. We realized after we initiated that process that not all the questions on that questionnaire were relevant to law firms. So we learned that we had to tailor the questions that we were asking law firms, right? So we can get to what was really important, identifying the risks and the gaps. So that was another change. And then the third, we realized that it was, again, very administrative to ask law firms to complete a Word document. It took them very long. And when we got it, it took us long to review it and assess it. So the implementation of technology allowed us to assess more firms quicker. So it allowed us to move away from this administrative process, and it gave us a quicker view into the risk of our portfolio.
Yep, good. Okay, Anthony, let me turn to you a little bit, because it's one thing to talk about flexibility and velocity, and we're driving assessments and we're getting stakeholder buy-in. Those things are all great, but you have to actually get on the phone with the firms and have these conversations that can sometimes be challenging, right? So tell me a little bit about how rolling out this program has impacted, for better or for worse, your relationship with your firms.
Sure, thanks, Shay. I'd have to say that overall, our law firm due diligence program has definitely been enhanced the relationship that we've had with these firms. Initially, we thought that we may receive some pushback, but overwhelmingly, we've been really impressed with the firm's willingness to respond, as well as have an ongoing dialogue around their security posture. This isn't just fill out a questionnaire, we get it, and then that's it. We're working together to ultimately, do a better job together and become more secure, to make sure that we're protecting all this sensitive information that we share on a day-to-day basis. As far as like anything that's really like hindered relationships, I can't think of anything that comes to mind where it's really had a big impact on the relationship in a negative way. Mm-hmm. We've received a lot of positive feedback. There seems to be a common understanding of the need to assess information security posture, especially in today's environment. And at the end of the day, we're all working with and sharing that sensitive information, like I just said, to make sure that we're taking appropriate measures to ensure that it's being protected properly.
Yeah. I think, again, this benefit of the relationship, it really serves you well. How do you incorporate your in-house attorneys who, again, have as strong of a relationship, if not stronger, with these firms, but might not have the level of depth of understanding around the cyber issues that someone like the business information security officer might? What role do your in-house attorneys play in this whole process?
So the attorneys, we really use them if we're maybe not getting responses from firms. Then we'll escalate to them to maybe work with their partner at the firm to have the certain items addressed. And overall, they've been really receptive with the way that we've gone about conducting our program. I'm sure that part of this is likely the result of what Mike touched on a little bit earlier, that we had the support of leadership, right from the beginning. So that kind of worked its way down, down the chain of command. And it also helps that we just have a great group of attorneys that understand what it is that we're trying to do here. We're not meant to be a roadblock. We've designed our program in a way that we make sure that we're being considerate of the immediate need to engage outside counsel from time to time, while also making sure that we're covered, from a due diligence perspective. So we hold periodic internal training to make sure that they're always kept abreast of what our process is, what we've been doing, how that impacts their firms, and we do our best to make sure that they're informed with regard to where their firms stand within our program.
Yeah. So Mike, you mentioned that one of the things you do, or at least try to do, is manage up and manage expectations and visibility. But you also mentioned that it's a very horizontal organization. When you have all of these attorneys that you need their buy-in, you need their help, can you give us a little bit more color on, Anthony makes it sound like we just had a training and everyone was on board and away we go. Is there more to that story, or was it really that straightforward?
There's probably more to that story if we sat back and think about it. This is a period of time that we're talking about over the last couple of years now. But I would say, Anthony talked about flexibility, recognition that, we can't hold the line on a burning legal issue that requires the attention of maybe a new law firm while we, go through this 40-page Word document, right? Like going back to the early days, or even today, where we got, where we have technology in our toolkit to kind of help us there. Our recognition of that has kind of allowed the attorneys to understand that we are not a roadblock, right? We've done this in a way that we do a lot of the administrative work, whether it's the cyber work or some of the other things that we require of new firms, simultaneous to allowing the lawyers to get their answers, right? So you can imagine a couple of conversations that go along that line, and folks start to soon realize that this is really something that is new to them, but being required at the enterprise level. You kind of come back to the idea that leadership supports this. We use their voice to get this kind of message out. And so, the idea here is from different angles, we are making sure that folks understand that we're here to help. We're not here to hurt or to slow them down. That there's a huge focus at our company on, being quicker and more risk tolerant. And so this kind of just fit right into that. We've probably had a conversation or two where folks didn't really understand what we were trying to get at, but the overwhelming majority of our discussions, certainly from what Anthony shares with me and what Jomara shares with me, it's very rare that we need to escalate. And so, I think it's due to all of the things that we've talked about earlier today. Yeah,
good. So Anthony, let me come back to you. Help me understand how this comes to life on a daily basis. Maybe walk me through either a day in the life, or maybe a little bit of the life cycle of a firm as they engage with you through this process. What's that like for you on the ground every day?
Sure. So, the typical day for a member of our team, we have Jomara, Mike, and myself, and then we also have two other analysts on the team who really get involved with, moving everything, down the road and closing out open items. So typically we probably start with our team following up with a firm on remediation, some items that we've sent to them previously that we're waiting to get a response on, or to see where they're in relation to making progress towards completing their questionnaire, right? Because without the questionnaire, then that's really the starting point, getting that submitted. So we'll work to review newly received information from firms and analyze that to see if it's in line with what we would expect as a company for our info security program. And then we also maintain a log of all of our firms across the portfolio, and we want to make sure that that's updated with the current status. So, at any time we can look back at that and see where a firm is, because we do get calls from attorneys periodically to see where a firm is and if they're able to share a certain type of information with them or
Sure.
not. If they're not, how they're going to, how we can make sure that we're not, like Mike said, slowing down the business, and trying to make everyone happy.
Right.
So other times we might schedule some calls with the law firm contacts where we're discussing the overall process and address the remediation items that we've sent to them. And the goal here is always to, come to an agreement on how we mitigate these items and agree on a date for, when those should be completed, so that then we can also follow up and get those items closed out. So, I mean, every day is, definitely not created equal, but the goal every day is to enhance our program, make it more efficient, more streamlined. And we work with the firms to, talk about our program and see if there's any points where, maybe they think we could be doing a better job of communicating, or,
Sure.
so on and so forth.
Yeah. Great. So let me come back to you now, Jomara. When you take a step back or take a pause and reflect, what are one or two of the key successes that you've seen come out of the work that your entire team is contributing to? And frankly, it sounds like the entire department is lending their collective effort towards.
Yeah, so I think a challenge that we realized at the onset, one of the challenges in this space is that you ask a third party to complete an assessment, a questionnaire, and then it's hard to keep up, right? It's hard to figure out like the what, trying to analyze data and put it together, a lot of administration. So I think two things that I find, in my opinion, that were very successful are, one, by way of implementing the technology, we're able to identify gaps, right? And so by identifying these gaps, we were able to, send out to the law firms and say, hey guys, here's what we've identified. Let's work together to close these gaps, right? So I think that just right there is a win for both of us, right? Not only for the law firm, because their information security posture has now matured and is better, and then our data is better protected, right? So we're both winning here. So I think definitely the closure of gaps. And then the second thing that I think is a key success is that we are now in a place where we have the ability to generate the so what questions, right? So now we have all of this data that we've gathered and that we're going to continue gathering, because this isn't a once and we're done, right? This is designed to be a dynamic program where we're continuously monitoring our law firms and working together to make sure that we're protecting our information. I think that a key success now is, the so what are the patterns that we identify now? What are the recommendations for the law firms and for our internal stakeholders right now that we've gotten all of these law firms assessed? What are the risks based on the threats, right, and the vulnerabilities that exist? What should we focus on, right? So all of that, having all of that data that can be analyzed to better manage the risk, really, right, which is what we're here to do on an ongoing basis, is a huge success in my opinion.
Yeah, I think that's a really nice way to put it. The ability to get down to the work of managing the risks and not the administrative level is huge, right? Because yeah, great. So Mike, let me ask you, we've heard a little bit from Jomara around managing the risk, and we can talk about controls and gaps and implementation, and Anthony's out there shaking the tree for remediation and updates. How do you translate all of that into business value? It's easy for us on the cyber side to talk about cyber stuff. How does that come together in terms of business conversations from your perspective?
Yeah, it's a good question. I would say a couple of things come to mind right off the bat. The first would be the fact that we're managing such a large portfolio with what I would consider to be a pretty lean team, certainly did not go unnoticed, right? I think, we just like everybody else we're always looking at making sure that we've got, the right people on the right work and that we're not kind of overstaffed in places where risk and value kind of doesn't resonate. And I think this team folks that you see on the screen here, along with the two analysts that help Anthony day to day, I think is by and large in our company considered maybe one of the smallest and leanest that's managing a portfolio of that size. So that's number one, right? I think we're well positioned in that respect when you think about business value. The second, this program at Prudential is considered an alternate program. And so, Jomara can probably talk a little bit more about this if I leave anything out, but it's alternate because it does not necessarily follow the same pattern that a third-party risk management program would follow for vendors other than law firms, right? It's not alternate in the sense that we are following through on measuring controls and security posture in where we see the biggest risks based on our relationships and the fact that these firms are providing legal services to us. And so we've been given high praise by the fact that we're doing this differently. But we're focused on what it is that the enterprise team would expect us to focus on with a small and lean team, not struggling with the administrative components that we've talked about existing at the beginning of the program. So that's kind of the way I would frame out the response to business value. Jomara, I don't know if there's anything else that you would weigh in on, but I know for sure that this program is kind of well regarded and is kind of held up as the model from an alternate program perspective at Prudential.
I think you're spot on, Mike.
Okay.
Jomara, what have your conversations been like with the global third-party risk management team as you're running what they call an alternate program, but certainly in alignment philosophically with what they're doing? How does that dialogue come to life?
Yeah, again, I think it goes back to number one, having really good working relationships, right? So that when you're trying to build something off the ground that's different than what's ever, than what's already happening at a big enterprise like Prudential, I think that's very important. And the conversations have been, how can we align our program, our law firm risk management program, to the global or enterprise program as closely as possible, so that we're not deviating from what the enterprise expects. So that those have been the conversations, and then in return, we've educated them, right, on what we're trying to do, why this is different, why it has to be tailored, and they've been receptive, and they've given us latitude to tailor this along the way, so that it's not so that we're not a roadblock essentially, right, as we're trying to do this for the business and again for the law firms themselves.
Right. Yeah, I think your team has done a really nice job of supporting all of your stakeholders, not just your attorneys and your firm counterparts and the DGCs, AGCs, and GC at Prudential, but also your enterprise third-party risk folks and each other in getting this work done. So Anthony, let me come back to you. I think I'd be remiss if I didn't ask about the elephant in the room of COVID. Obviously, we're all dialing in from home this morning and not from the office. Can you tell us a little bit about what COVID has meant or has manifested to your program, either operationally or from a risk perspective?
Yeah, so I mean, like you just said, right, we're all working remotely today. Luckily, it hasn't really had too much of an impact on our team. We have all the tools that we need to be able to do the same work that we would be doing in the office or remote. So that's been definitely helpful. We were prepared to for a scenario like this. And when we talk about like the firms, the only real impact that we've seen was initially in relation to like turnaround time for, we would send a request and maybe it would take a little bit of time for them to come back to us, or, they needed to be in the office to implement something. So, those have kind of been put on hold, and there's not really much that we can do there. This impact though, hasn't really done much to the overall program. We're still moving forward with our roadmap. Some things may be delayed a bit here and there, but overall, we're still continuing to move forward as we had planned. One of the benefits that I would like to, just an example of our embrace embracing of technology that I'd like to highlight was when we first began working remotely back in like the March, April timeframe. We were able to easily consolidate all the information that we had compiled across our entire outside counsel portfolio, and we were able to hone in on specific set of questions that were tied to business continuity and incident response. And so what this did was it allowed us to quickly identify those firms that may have been impacted by the pandemic and connect with our attorneys that use those firms just to bring this to their attention to, you know, see if there was, you know, any like delays or if they were working on matters that, you know, were time sensitive, and just to let them know that, you know, this pandemic may, you know, to at least reach out to these firms.
Mm-hmm.
So without using this technology, if we were using, you know, our old process where we had, you know, the firms complete a questionnaire that was free form, where they were able to, you know, input different responses to each of the questions, you know, it would have just taken a considerable amount of more time to wrap our hands around this information and then be able to analyze it and then move on it. So, I mean, by having this tool right at the, you know, we have all this information at our fingertips, and it really allowed for us to move through that process efficiently. And, you know, it was just a great example of how technology just made this whole process, you know, much more seamless.
Great. Yeah, and I think your ability to build a resilient program and a resilient team has helped you and helped your attorneys manage these risks. To your point, and to Jomara's, answering the so what question with the ability to act on the data you have to make better decisions is really the big goal. So I think congratulations are in order. You guys have done a great job. We've done a lot of reflecting, journey up to this point. Mike, let me turn back to you. Looking forward, what do you see as next steps for your program, growth, evolution, goals? I think you're on mute.
Yeah, it's a good question. You know, we are always looking for ways to improve, whether it be this program or other things that we're focused on. And so, you know, we've spent, you know, the last couple of years getting to the point that we're at today, and we've been able to better understand where our firms lie on that security evaluation roadmap. And so we're going to, of course, continue to take the higher risk firms and kind of hold them to higher standards, right? To the standards that we're expected to hold them to based on the kind of information that they receive from Prudential. But, you know, when I look forward, you know, a couple of things that come to mind, you know, we're looking to improve our ability to do reporting and metrics in a way that I think is digestible for leadership, right? And so, you know, today we could talk about all the gaps that we have and how many gaps particular firms have in different areas, but being able to easily take that information and articulate it to executives and lawyers that are really on the front lines is something that I think we're looking to improve. And then, you know, even further out, I would say, you know, there's going to be a time where we get to more of an ongoing monitoring and where that's the focus of our program, right? Up until now, we've evaluated, we're working hard on closing gaps, but we will get to a point where ongoing monitoring, things like site visits, which, you know, are probably not easy to do today, but, you know, I can tell you that Jomara and team have done some virtual site visits, even before COVID, right? Because we're not all going to get on a plane to just go and check out the, you know, the physical components that we need to see when it comes to some of our higher risk firms or vendors even. So that's what I would say kind of is next, you know, reporting, being able to kind of package it in a way that's digestible, moving out of remediation and into monitoring, and then, you know, probably a little bit longer term, getting our arms around site visits that are required for our highest risk firms. Yeah,
great answer. I really like that drive to make meaning out of this data for, you know, the business decision makers. That's a great goal. So let me give the last question to you, Jomara, and then we'll open it up to the audience. What advice would you give to somebody who's looking to build a program like this within their organization?
I'd say again, we just want to reiterate, have buy-in from your internal key stakeholders. That's very key. Don't build the program in a silo. Make sure you educate everyone that you're going to need buy-in from and that you're going to have a partnership with. Develop the strong relationships with the internal attorneys, right? So that they understand what it is that we're going to do, why it's important, make sure that they understand what the value is. And then also take the law firms into consideration here, right? Because this is a partnership. It's not meant to be an exercise of pain for the law firms, right? We want to maintain that relationship with the business. And so I think just building relationships all across the board so that you have buy-in and that, just be transparent with all of your stakeholders, even when you're not getting it right.
Yep. Yeah, I think this approach that you've taken, that it's a team sport, and you need all the players to come in and fulfill their positions. That's I think the reason why you found such success. So great. Let me turn it back over to you, Sylvia. We'll go ahead and conclude the panel portion of it and open it up to audience questions at this point.